talk to me? Eddie, are you there? Eddie?
It's a violence nightmare. I love you, too. I love you. I don't know if I'm going to be okay here. I love you so much.
I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
Obviously a pretty scary experience. I saw a guy fall out of probably the 91st story all the way down.
Okay. Now you can stay on the line with me.
We promised to never forget. It was a day that changed America forever. It will never be the same again. It will forever be a different America than we have ever known before, or will ever know again. We were truly a united country at that point. Everyone, regardless of color, social status, economic background, or education, had come together in true unity as one country and as one country should. The day was September 11th, 2001.
It is Tuesday morning, the 11th of September, and you will not forget this date.
My name is Kevin McIntyre, and you are listening to episode 4 of the Podfather Show. It was a regular morning. I, like many of you, remember it clearly. Even to this day, I can still remember it as if it were just last week. I'd gotten up for work that morning, got dressed, probably had a cup of coffee. I remember I was running a little bit late that day. I was running a paint crew on the west side of town. And I remember getting in my truck, the work truck, and just pulling out of the apartment complex parking lot where I was staying, turning onto the road, and hadn't even made it a couple blocks. And like every other morning, like many other Americans that travel to work every morning, I turned on the Bob and Tom Show, expecting to hear the usual morning rhetoric, jokes, and some pretty raunchy dialogue. Instead, I heard chatter that was confusing to me at the moment. They were talking about a building on fire and a plane having hit something. And at first, I thought, this isn't even the Bob and Tom Show. I mean, I had to look at the dial on the radio to make sure I was listening to the correct station. It wasn't funny. They weren't laughing like they normally do. And once I realized that I am listening to the Bob and Tom Show, that's when I started to truly, I guess you could say, dial in my ears and trying to make sense of what it was that I was hearing. I hadn't seen the news yet. This was the first that morning's incidents were falling upon my ears. It wasn't the normal funny jokes and everything. It was very confusing at that moment. And then when I finally realized they had spoken enough as I'm driving down the road to where I can start to fit pieces of the information together, it actually started to hit me that this isn't a joke. This isn't the morning skit for the Bob and Tom Show. That something's going on here. And by the time I got to the main traffic light, probably about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile down the road, it had hit me. I mean, they'd finally started saying some key things, some key words and phrases that, they were talking about planes hitting the World Trade Center and everything. And it hit me that this was real. So I immediately turned to another station and they were talking about it too. Tried one more station, they were talking about it. And I knew then that this was big. Something enormous was going on. I tried calling a couple of the guys that worked on the crew with me, no answers. So I turned the truck around, went back home. And like many other Americans on that morning, walked in the door, sit down in front of the TV, turned on the news. In every imaginable station that you can think of that ever reported any type of news of any kind, and some that didn't, were showing pictures of the New York skyline with smoke and fire billowing up out of the World Trade Centers. And I had made it home just in time to see the second tower get hit. It was life-changing in that very second. I'm sure many of you can remember somewhat the same feeling. Even now, sitting here speaking this, it's hard to find the right words. As all those emotions come flooding back, and remembering just how real that was on that day. And I remember seeing on the TV screen, the skyline, the helicopter circling the World Trade Center, and the occasional military jet flying around over the skyline and stuff. And as the day went on, they started to show interviews and stuff, and they had news reporters on the ground. And of course that video footage wasn't real descriptive because there was nothing but dust and clouds and debris everywhere, and it was really hard to make out what we were looking at. And though I do remember that day, 19 years ago, I don't remember any other day between here and then, nor before that, as clearly as I remember that morning. I'm sure many of you can agree with that. You probably know exactly where you were at, exactly what you were doing, who you were with, maybe what you were wearing. And you'll never forget. And all of us sitting there in front of our TVs, even without it being spoken, knew that our lives were forever changed. We had no idea at the moment just how impactful and to what degree things would change, but we knew they were never going to be the same. There was that gut feeling in all of us that said, this is a life changer. This is the other side of the coin. And as time went by, there was talks of war. There was talks of conspiracy theories. And don't worry, this isn't a conspiracy theory podcast. I'm just reliving my memories of everything, and not being partial as to what I'm going to relate to. But if you can think it was there. There were even, I remember one of the guys that was on the one of the guys that was on the construction crew with me. He was an older gentleman. He had served in a war. I don't remember which war, but he told me he had served in a war. It may have been the Vietnam War. He was an older guy, already retired, but he was there, to get some part-time income. And I remember him telling me, we went back to work a few days later, and I remember him telling me, he said, you watch, it'll come out that our government knew about this, had some ideas of what, or that something was going to happen, but they would have done nothing to stop it. He told me then. I asked him, I said, how could you possibly know that? He said, well, it's the same with every major attack and every major war, and like with Pearl Harbor even, he gave me all these examples, and it later turned out he was correct. But I mean, those were just some of the conversations that we had, and those were some of the, I guess you could say, conspiracy theories that were going around. the way life moved forward from there, I mean, the immediate days afterwards, you can probably recall gas prices shooting to what we thought was high at the time, you know, $5, $6, $7 a gallon. And nowadays that's almost normal. I mean, it's dropped back down to around $3 or $4 a gallon, but that's only been within the last couple of years. I mean, it reached into every facet of our life and has changed everything from, you know, the NSA and the CIA getting more control over, you know, technology and being able to listen into things and monitor citizens and things, to the airports and like, you know, now you have to go through all these body scanners and everything, and everything's just more in depth. We've lost a lot of privacy because of that. But one thing that upsets me that didn't carry forward was the unity. And that's what I want to talk to you about. The unity, the camaraderie, the brotherhood of Americans was the shortest lived part out of that entire experience. It was gone within a matter of months to just a few short years. In fact, remembering back when bin Laden was finally killed, I remember that we had already lost that American brotherhood and camaraderie and unity. By the time that had happened, we were already, you know, at each other. Before the September 11th attacks, it was just kind of a, you know, hey, we're here type thing. America's good. We're here enjoying life. And then the attacks happened, and I saw unity and love from one American to another like I've never seen again since then. And that bothers me, because today in America, we have an ongoing chaotic background that's like a white noise almost in our society that's just not going away. And you would think that times like this, we would come together like we did then. I've always thought, and I always said, and I'm sure some of you had too, that the next big tragedy, hopefully there'd never be one, but that's what it would take to bring Americans back together again. You know, I'd always believed, you know, that when times got dark, Americans came together. I believed that because of what I had seen with the 9/11 attacks. So I guess I was kind of conditioned to think, okay, well, if things get really dark, we'll come together again. But we haven't. We've drifted even further apart. And now I have to wonder, is there anything that can pull us back together? You know, many of the people out in the streets, you know, doing the rioting and looting right now, let's face it, it is what it is. That's domestic terrorism. Terrorism is defined as violence or threats of violence for political purposes or political gain or with a political agenda. Well, that's what's going on. It's the looting and rioting and the beatings. That's a political agenda. Therefore, that makes it terrorism. And since it's domestic, it makes it domestic terrorism. And I really thought I would have seen more people come together over this than what I have. Sure, there's a lot of talk on Facebook and everything, but like with the 9/11 attacks, it wasn't talk. Sure, we didn't have Facebook then, but it wasn't talk. I mean, we were really there where we would stop and speak to strangers and about our day and about everything going on, and we would share information and we would share news, and everybody genuinely cared. I don't think America has that love anymore. I don't think that the friendship, the sincerity is there the way it was then, nor like when our forefathers intended it to be, or the way they intended it to be. And I'm actually more concerned now for the future of America than what I was this time last year. Because this time last year, I still believed that if times got dark, we'd come together. I always believed that. Sure, many of you did too. Then we got to ask ourselves, what the hell are we doing? Why are we like this? I mean, why aren't we doing, I don't even know which questions to ask. I mean, it's all just so confusing, but why aren't those of us not involved or that are against these, the rioting and looting, why aren't we doing more? I guess it's starting to happen, but man, it's taken a long time. Why aren't we putting the heat on our politicians? Why aren't we stopping each other in the streets to say hello and ask how you're doing? Granted, the majority of the people doing the rioting and looting today were either not born when the 9/11 attacks happened, or they were too young to even remember it. So they wouldn't remember that citizenship love that we had, the American brotherhood, the patriotism. They wouldn't have remembered it. They were either too young or not even born yet. And it's sad, twofold sad. I mean, one, I would never want anyone to have to live what we lived through on September 11th, 2001. Nobody should have to experience that. But at the same time, everybody should have, or at least get to, not have to, everybody should get to experience the American unity and citizenship and patriotism that was the effect, the echo of the attacks. Everybody should get to experience that one love for each other. Sadly, most of us today don't. I'd like everybody that this podcast, if whoever's ears this podcast may fall upon, even if you're on the left, I mean, I get your cause, I do. But you're not going to sway anybody to feel for your cause with violence and threats and domestic terrorism. The only way we are all going to come together and see eye to eye and see each other's viewpoints is if we respect each other's feelings and we stop with the attitude that my feelings are what matter. My opinion's what matters. I don't care about your opinion because that's not going to get us anywhere. If you want someone to care about your opinion and your perspective and your feelings, your agenda, you have to give that to everyone else as well. Because people, there are dark times on America right now. A different kind of darkness than what we experienced during the 9/11 attacks. But it's a darkness nonetheless. And in many ways, worse than what we experienced then. So if we've ever needed that citizenship and that American love and American patriotism and American brotherhood attitude back again, it's now. I only hope that going forward, that many begin to reflect on things the way that I have, and that we can find a way to unite. We can find a way to all get along. We won't all get everything that we want all the time. Sometimes we won't get anything that we want. But if we all have to live here together, And we do. There's no reason why we can't work together. We've done it before. When times got dark, we pulled together as one people, one nation, one United States. Truly, we were a United States of America. I believe we can do it again. I'm Kevin McIntyre, and you have listened to episode 4 of the Podfather Show.
It is Tuesday morning, the 11th of September, and you will not forget this date.